about my love. Wasn't it enough? Just let me know so I can hold you.
Let's get into it, man. Top 5 offensive linemen. 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗀𝘀𝗀𝗀, you're going to start us out, my man.
Let's go down to Will Campbell. I'm conflicted, right? Because overall, the tape, right? The tape is pretty solid. There's questions about the arm length, and at times, I think that the tape properly reflects those concerns. When I saw him against Shemar Stewart and Nick Scorton, there were a handful of plays where he was simply overpowered, caught a little bit flat-footed. Whether that's more of a stance thing or an arm length and power problem, I'm not sure. But to his credit, he did have a handful of good reps against both players in that game, right?
And it was like the second half of that game too, which is great because he recovered after halftime. So
exactly. And meanwhile, the rest of the LSU offense struggled that second half, right?
Yeah.
And because what you want to see from offensive linemen is when you go up against other elite players, are you able to adjust? Are you able to counter, right, some of the moves that they're showing you? And you also have to recognize you're not going to win every rep. That's just how it is in the trenches, defensive line or offensive line.
Yep.
And what I saw from Will Campbell was he has, I think with some more proper coaching, a good offensive line coach who can help him with his stance a little bit, help him, have a lower center of gravity, right, which is going to help him, not get overpowered as easily. I think that he could develop into a high-end tackle, right, despite quote-unquote like shorter arms. So I will say, like, there is some concern there, but to me, it's not like an Achilles heel. I still view him as an excellent prospect here.
And I think a lot of people confuse like the short arm thing with like the actual length of the arms. Like, and this is what I'll say. A lot of people have their information totally wrong about arm length with a lot of these guys because they're all very similar, right? Like Armand Membou is as similar to Will Campbell in arm length if you were to pull out a measuring stick. So let's not be confused here. Whenever scouts and everybody talks about arm length, it's usually how well that they use their arms in pass blocking or run blocking situations, right? And if they're turtled in that way, then you have to look at it as like that's their natural ability in blocking a defender, right? So when you talk about arm length, it's not pulling out a tape measure. It's what have we seen this guy extend and use his full arm length? Because you are what you are, right? And you really can't teach that. Maybe some guys can mold their way, but there's arm extenders like Kelvin Banks and Josh Simmons, and then there's short arm extenders like Will Campbell. That's what concerns the crap out of a lot of scouts is just his turtling ability sometimes. But yeah, that's all I'll say with that because I think a lot of people get that confused and then they just run with it and then confuse their audiences as well.
Right. And I think that the big thing for me is how he uses his arms, because he has good technique, but with when it comes to his hand placement, but at times, he can just get overpowered, and it's a lot easier to get overpowered when you face a guy like Shemar Stewart, who just has an incredibly large wingspan, who can extend quickly with the power that he has, right? That just makes it difficult for a guy like Will Campbell at times.
I had to go watch the tape from the previous year and then come back this year and say what happened, because I think he had a little bit of a fall off from the previous year for sure. And maybe it's because of having a more of a pocket guy with Garrett Nussmeier than it was with Jaden Daniels. Hey, when your quarterback's able to rush out the pocket, those statistics, it's statistically those stats and pass rush win rate and stuff like that tend to go up when a guy could be a little bit more athletic. So, and maybe that was the case. Maybe realistically he had a better year this year than statistically last year that he had. But outside of that, I think if he decides to play tackle, if he decides to play guard, I think Will Campbell in 3 years, we're going to look back and say, damn, why did we put such a chip on that dude's shoulder? You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of teams are going to pay for it. I look at him as the Tyler Linderbaum of this draft, where a lot of people didn't know what he was going to be like at the next level. They just knew that when he was playing center, he was good. But with some of the things that he was doing that he was so vanilla with that transition over to the NFL. And I think Tyler Linderbaum ended up being a pretty good player. You know what I'm saying? Of his first year to now, they love him down there with the Ravens. Ask Derrick Henry how he feels about him. Ask Lamar Jackson. That middle of the field is pretty secure. And I think Will Campbell can be that. I would love to see what Will Campbell looked like at center, to be honest.
That'd be interesting.
It'd be very interesting. I think he would have the skill set to do it.
Senior Bowl darling.
Let's go.
Grey Zabel. I
Beast.
just, again, left guard, right tackle, left guard, right tackle. I just being able to play inside and outside wherever he's needed, especially on both sides of the field, left and right side, and just absolutely dominated Senior Bowl. Draft stock went way up. But yeah, I think Grey Zabel's going to. He could drop to the second round, but I think he'll be like one of the sneakier ones to go in the first round.
He'll be the Graham Barton of this year, where a lot of people had him in the second,
Correct.
but he went in the first.
But he went early in the first anyways, yes.
Yeah, for sure. Grey Zabel, personal favorite of mine. I just think, you look at the FCS the toolkit that's there, and he's definitely a guy that, and for those that don't know, go look at the news about the last spring portal acquisitions and that how much money that they were throwing at Grey Zabel to transfer up to schools. Alabama wanted him. Georgia wanted him. The who's wanted Grey Zabel to move up. So you have to kind of take that in your evaluation. It's like, man, guys that are coaching, guys that are scouts that are not us, they wanted Grey Zabel too. Gray's a great, he gave Colorado fits, and he gave every single school fits that he went against. And I think his pass and run rate win percentage was like in the 90s. I mean, he was incredibly consistent since he was at North Dakota, and they won a championship this year, right? So, and
I believe so, yeah.
And he was a big part of that.
Again.
Ask Cam Miller how he felt, the quarterback. Every time he ran towards his side. So
he said, I'm comfortable.
But yeah, like next on the list, Armand Membou. He's someone who's grown on me throughout the process of just looking at this draft class. I mean, he has excellent tape. He has excellent numbers as well. Didn't allow a sack this past season. Only allowed 8 pressures, which I mean is one of the lowest in this class. Considering, I guess looking at the rest of the top prospects on the offensive line, especially at tackle. But for me, Membou is he's the number 1 right tackle in this class, right? This is something where some guys can be a swing tackle, right? You can draft them as a left or right tackle. You can draft them as a swing tackle so they can play either side, regardless of what they played in college. But there are some guys where you want to leave them where they played in college.
Facts.
Right?
Facts.
So many guys come out as excellent left tackles because that is your blind side protector for most quarterbacks, right? Predominantly, your quarterback's going to be right-handed. So the left tackle has always been viewed as a higher priority than the right tackle. But man, you have some lefty quarterbacks out there, and you have some teams who recognize the importance of having an elite right tackle. Right? You look at Lane Johnson with the Philadelphia Eagles.
I was about to say, even without
right?
left-handed quarterbacks.
Right.
Yeah.
But so when you find an elite right tackle, right, you got to get your hands on him. So I think that Membou, cream of the crop when it comes to right tackles here. To me, this is a really good and top-heavy tackle class, right? You notice that all 5 of my guys here, since I have Donovan Jackson listed as a tackle, they're all tackles. No interior guys in my top 5, just because this tackle class is so top heavy, and the interior, a lot of day 2 guys here for me. But Membou, I think he's going to carve out a lot of interest because he plays on the right. So it's possible he gets drafted before Donovan Jackson, right? He could even get drafted before one of Banks or Campbell. I don't think he goes before both, but I could see a team just who needs a right tackle specifically going out there and getting him. His athleticism also stands out, and has extremely clean tape against a tough SEC schedule. I mean, when you're playing, the Texas A&M defensive line, when you're playing right Alabama and South Carolina's defensive line as well, Kyle Kennard and what's his name?
TJ
off the edge.
Sanders.
Yeah, TJ Sanders on the interior and Dylan Stewart off the other edge.
Stewart,
I
yeah.
mean,
That's
yeah,
who that's who you're thinking of, probably.
you're facing vaunted
Freak.
defensive lines over and over again, and he looked the part in each of those games. Membou, I view in high regard.
Yeah.
And same thing with Josh Simmons, right? At number
I think
5.
also part of the thing with Armand Membou is just with how like young and like untapped he is, and he's already like previewed as, I agree with you, as the best right tackle in this draft. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge for my list. But I fully 100%. I agree with you on that part.
And he just
so
turned
young.
21 like 2 weeks ago.
I was about to say he was going to be like the youngest guy at the Senior Bowl, and then he canceled. But like,
right,
you know, with him being there, he was going to be the youngest guy, and yeah, it was just dude was absolutely just raw talent at such a young age. And again, already like as a junior, just turned 21 like 2 weeks ago, like you just mentioned. So like dude will be able to drink when he gets drafted. Good on him. But like, yeah, at 19, 20 being talked about like this,
it's very impressive. And for Membou, right?
You got to feel bad for those like 5th-year seniors that are like, fuck, man.
Dude, yeah. I mean, he burst onto the scene after this past year, and I think the team is going to fall in love with him in the teens of the first round of the draft.
Armand Membou, I mean, kind of like what I mentioned with 𝗕𝘂𝗀𝘀𝗀𝗀, or when 𝗕𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 was talking about him. One of the younger guys, like, again, turned literally 21 2 weeks ago. I think the best right tackle in this draft class. You know, freshman year kind of just exploded onto the scene, and at the combine I think he got like the highest athleticism score, which isn't what I'm going
and
off
people
of,
are like,
you know.
oh, his tape he doesn't have enough tape. Whatever, shut up.
I was about to say in 2022 he had started like 5 games at right tackles and then just locked in that right tackle position since his freshman year. Sophomore and junior year absolutely became an anchor on the right side of the field for Brady Cook over there. I just, you know, I think with such young, untapped like potential with Armand Membou and already being, you know, so young and so great at the right tackle position. Yeah, I think he's a top 5 draft pick. I think he's going to go first round overall, maybe to like a later team.
He's definitely the best right tackle, and we'll do the film study next week, and you guys are going to see this. Like, he's absolutely like he's consistent, if anything.
I really debated between Simmons here and Josh Conerly from Oregon, because Conerly has shown constant improvement year after year at an elite program and stayed healthy. Meanwhile, Josh Simmons, he had elite tape when he was playing. Through 5 games, he only allowed 1 pressure and only had 1 penalty called on him. Didn't allow a sack in 5 games. Very impressive. The problem for me is that knee injury, right? Those knee injuries can be pretty worrisome for an offensive lineman. Why? Because they have to carry around a lot of weight, and they have to move well with that weight, right? You know, if Tez Johnson has a knee injury, right, he's, you know, maybe the positional demand on his knees is different than an offensive lineman, but he's carrying half the weight that some of these guys are. So I'm a little worried about Josh Simmons in terms of his knee, but in terms of pure talent, I mean, you could make an argument that he's in the same echelon as Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell. However, the injury concern here for me is what bumps him down to 5, so much so that I almost put Josh Conerly at my 5 position here instead.
Josh Simmons, again, a lot of the guys that 𝗕𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 talked about. Left tackle, right tackle. I mean, that's, you know, I've seen that he visited with like Arizona was one of the teams, and I think that'd be an amazing position for him because, you know, for offensive lineman, 1 full year, 13 games starting at left tackle. The next year, a full year, 13 games starting at right tackle, and you were a beast at both of the positions. The swing tackle positions are immaculate, especially if there's like injury or whatever, or it's literally like hey, we're going to draft you to replace, like for the Ravens, for example, we're going to draft you to replace our left tackle because he's getting up there in age. But for the time being, you can start at right tackle, which we have a position open because of Morgan Moses leaving. And then eventually you'll be able to take over for our left tackle. I think, you know, the versatility, being able to play left and right side of tackle are going to be appealing to teams. You can plug and play whenever, whether it be you're waiting for him to take over as a starter to replace an age-old veteran, or you need a position wide open there. He's able to fill in 2 positions.
Josh Simmons, of course, before the injury was absolutely dominant. You guys have spoken nauseum about that kid. I just wonder how much more dominant they would have been. I understand Donovan Jackson stood in place for him and did a great job, but I wonder how much, outside runs from 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 would have been if he was still in there. Hard pressed to say that they would have been even more dominant. They wouldn't have lost that game against Michigan. You know what I'm saying? Mason Graham definitely, and Josiah Stewart would have had some issues going against Josh Simmons for sure.
Kelvin Banks, 3-year starter at the University of Texas at left tackle. That's right. From his first career game, week 1 of his freshman season, he has anchored down the blind side of Quinn Ewers. So the thing about Kelvin Banks that a lot of people were talking about, right, was, does he move inside the guard? Does he, right? Questions about maybe his agility, right? His quickness of feet out at tackle were a concern. But when you look at his build, when you look at his tape, and you look at who he's competed against rep by rep, there are very few players over the last few years at offensive line who can say that they performed as well as they did for as long as they did since being a starter as a freshman against top competition. Kelvin Banks has excellent tape. There were a few games where some people found him to be a little bit shaky, like against Georgia. But when I went back and watched that film, man, a lot of those problems were mostly on the pocket presence of Quinn Ewers, not the blocking of Kelvin Banks. He got a lot of heat for that game, especially the first time they played in Austin. I just don't think that the hate there was warranted.
Yeah, so my breakdown, kind of exactly like with what we were saying, Kelvin Banks is going to be the consensus number 1. Not really much else to add on to him, but
yep.
This is kind of one of those ones that I feel like Kelvin Banks should be getting the talk that Joe Alt got last year, keep him pure at left tackle. And again, the one that he quote unquote struggled for was regular season Georgia. But again, we even went through there. Some of that wasn't even Quinn Ewers' fault. It's just receivers couldn't get open. There's the Twitter clips and everything on that. So, with Kelvin Banks, it's not really much else to add on about. I think he's the best offensive lineman in this draft class. I think he'll be a top, at worst, top 10 pick. I think he can easily go top 5, maybe to Patriots or Jacksonville,
Kelvin Banks is the best left tackle in this class. And a lot of people want to confuse it. The battles that this guy had even in high school, go back and watch his high school tape against him and Shamar Stewart. And they were battles. They got the best of each other. And, it was kind of fun seeing them play this past year against each other again. You know what I'm saying? It's great. He plays great competition. Our guy, Ethan Downs, had a horrible time against Kelvin Banks, and I'm a big fan of Ethan Downs. We talked about him for a long time now.
We've been talking about him for 2 years now.
Yeah, and I think it's great.